Welcome to Roots and Resilience. We have been moved by listening to the stories of wonderful people we have crossed paths with.
We have been inspired by their resilience throughout their personal and professional journeys and feel there are powerful lessons we can all learn from this.
I'm Tejal, and alongside my sister and co-host Nehal, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode.
So, hello everyone. Joining us today is Vasundra Tailor, a qualified pharmacist, best-selling author of two published novels, a grandmother, and a lover of classical Indian dance. She was born in India and raised in Zimbabwe when the country was called Rhodesia. She came to the UK in 1978 to complete a master's degree in pharmaceutical microbiology at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. After a long career in the NHS, she has recently retired and is currently indulging in her passion for reading and writing novels. In 2019, she received the Mo Zusharan Fiction Competition Runner-Up Prize for her first novel, and in 2023, she was awarded Student of the Year from the Writers' Bureau. Vasundra is based in London, where she lives with her husband. She loves looking after her two grandchildren, who live very close to her, allowing her many hours of joy spending time with them. Apart from writing and reading, Vasundra enjoys traveling the world and meeting people from diverse backgrounds. She especially likes to learn about people's individual journeys in life. And without further ado, welcome to Roots and Resilience, Vasundra.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tejal, for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. So, why Rhodesia? What led your family to move to what we now know is called Zimbabwe?
Yeah, it's a very interesting and a long story, but it was about maybe about, oh God, what would I say, 1910, 1911. Rhodesia was just beginning to come up and opportunities were becoming available. So my grandfather knew somebody who was working in Rhodesia in one of the smaller towns, and he decided to seek his fortune from Navsari in Gujarat to Rhodesia. So he took the boat down to Beira, which is in Mozambique. And then from Mozambique, I believe him and a few others went on a wagon cart, which took them days, if not weeks, to reach Harare, which is at that time, which was called Salisbury. So he set up shop there, and slowly but surely he built up a little business for himself in retail, I believe. And then I think soon after that, he went back to India, got married, and brought his wife over. And then the rest is history. And the community of the Asians or the Indians in Harare, Bulawayo, and a few other towns in Rhodesia grew in the same way. So my grandfather was one of the pioneers in the Indian community who went there. So subsequently, my father and his two brothers and two sisters were born there. And that's what the move was. So I'm really, I could say, second generation there.
I see.
Wow. And what do you remember from your childhood growing up in Rhodesia?
I remember so much because I went there when I was just a baby from India. I was born in India and as a baby, and I grew up there until I was about 18. I lived there. So, yeah, I mean, I had a happy childhood. We had a lovely family and community around us. There was no shortage of money or opportunities. We had our own Indian community hall. We had our own Hindu society school. We had our own functions and events. So, and it's a beautiful country. So I have very happy memories and I have loads of cousins and brothers and sisters and things there. So yeah, I have wonderful memories of growing up in Rhodesia.
Are you able to share any particular stories or memorable stories from that time that are very unique to that place?
Yeah. Well, since I've come to this country and I came here to the UK in when I was 18, I realized that although I'm Indian and a lot of the Indian people here that came here from East Africa, we have a lot in common. We have so many things that are not in common as well. Because in Rhodesia, what it was that we were a very small Indian community with a very large African population, Black African, and reasonably sized white population. But the white population, which was a minority, were the government there, and they were quite racist. So I grew up under a racist white minority government. And that was Ian Smith was the prime minister at the time. He broke away from Britain. It was a British colony. Him and his government broke away in 1965 when I was only 11 and formed this minority rule government based on segregation. So they decided that they wanted Indians to live in one area and to do their own thing. Coloureds, we used to call them coloureds, that's what they were called, but they were mixed race. So although we in the UK are sometimes called people of colour, we were not considered coloured, we were considered Indian. And then there were the mixed race, the coloured population. And then there were the Africans who were moved out into rural areas, the townships. So there was a very segregated society. And that's one of the things that none of us liked. None of us who were people of colour, we hated the segregation and the racism. And Rhodesia is just north of South Africa, the Republic of South Africa, where the apartheid is well known all over the world, which ended, I think it was in 89? We didn't have such blatant racism, but there was definitely blatant segregation. So there was why we're unique from the Indian people who came to this country from East Africa is that we underwent racism, but we were a very small Indian community compared to the huge Indian community in East Africa. So when people in the UK say, I'm from Zimbabwe, I immediately ask, oh, which family? Because we knew all the families there, the pioneer families. So that was the thing that was unique. And a few things that I can share were, even though there was racism, even though there was segregation, we grew up just thinking, oh, well, we're not going to let that bother us. We're going to just go ahead and live our lives. We had our own school and the opportunity there was good. We spoke English all the time, even at home. So I'm afraid my Gujarati is not as good as the Gujarati people who came to this country. But even then, we had a school, a Gujarati school. So we would go to English school in the morning and we would go to Gujarati school in the afternoon. So I can read and write, but my speech is not as good as my English. So that's another thing that's different. We actually were very good in English, and maybe that showed in my writing because we were taught English, I suppose the British way, and I've always loved it. So yeah, I've got some very good, happy memories of growing up with my friends and just contained in the Indian community. But I've also got some sad memories about how we would go to certain places and we would be turned away saying, sorry, we don't serve non-whites. So I can talk a little bit more about the difficulties. But the bright side of it was I had a very happy childhood growing up within the Indian community in Rhodesia.
And that's actually so interesting how you mentioned your English was much stronger and is much stronger than your Gujarati. And do you think that was a conscious decision by your parents to speak English at home?
No, it wasn't really. It's because my father was born there. So he grew up speaking English all the time, Gujarati at home with his parents. And my mother was born in South Africa. And she also grew up with the English system. So both my parents spoke English, read English, and the prevalent language was English. And it wasn't really conscious in our family. I suppose there were some Indian families where if people came from India and didn't really grow up in Rhodesia, they spoke more Gujarati. So I'm not saying I'm terrible at Gujarati, but I'm not as good as people around me. Like my husband is from Kenya originally. He's Indian, but grew up in Kenya and then came to this country. Him and his family speak brilliant Gujarati, but they don't speak brilliant English because we're in our 60s and 70s, so we're not young like you guys. We didn't grow up in this country, so that I find there's a big difference in the language. Yeah.
And did you, even though the society was segregated, did you feel safe as a woman growing up there? Or a girl?
Very, very safe, definitely. Yeah, because remember, I grew up in the 60s and then the 70s, and then it was in the 80s that I came here. Didn't feel any worries whatsoever. The Zimbabwean African is such a lovely, gentle person. He's not like Steve, you hear in South Africa about the Zulu Africans or the Africans that came from the fighter tribes. No, they were very, very gentle, and they took it for so long. Look how much trouble they took even when Robert Mugabe came to power. He didn't treat his own people properly. They were dying of hunger and everything in the rural areas, but they didn't fight back. So yes, I would walk around with my friends in town, no problem. um, there were, because of the segregation in the towns, we were allowed to mix, do the shopping, even though we were not white. We were allowed to go to white shops and give them our money. And the blacks also came, but they used to have to buy, from the window at the back. It was not very nice at all. But I didn't feel unsafe. We could go most places, no problem.
Under what circumstances did you decide to leave?
Right. So I was wanting to further my studies. I went to the University of Rhodesia to do pharmacy. And when I finished my pharmacy degree, I always wanted to come to the UK because growing up and it being a British colony originally, we read all the British books, like most people, I read all the classics, the growing India, the Enid Blyton books and so many others. And I was always imagining that Britain would be a wonderful country to come to. So I was always yearning to come here. So as soon as I finished my pharmacy degree, I persuaded my dad, look, I really need to go. My older brother had already come here to further his studies. He came to do a PhD here. So yeah, I got the opportunity to do a master's here at Strathclyde University because I knew the professor who was already a professor in University of Rhodesia. So, but the problem was we had Rhodesian passports. And after 1965, when Rhodesia declared its unilateral independence, we were cut off from Britain. So our passport was not recognized. So there was a difficulty in getting through, but there was a way if I could prove that I was going to study and I had all the paperwork, I could come through for that. So my professor sent me all the documents I needed. So I was able to come through and I came in 78 with those papers and went straight to Glasgow to do my master's. And yeah, I never looked back. I absolutely loved it from the moment I stepped off the airplane and came to London and then went to Scotland. And I still love it here.
Wow. And then were you the eldest sibling, or did you know people in Glasgow already? Or were you the first to make that transition out leaving Rhodesia?
No, in my family, I'm number 7. We are 9 in our family, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And it's absolutely wonderful having a great, great family. My father, if he was alive, he'd be 115. So, we're of that generation where the families were big. And my older brother, who was and is a retired solicitor, he came here first to do his PhD. So, because he came and I always looked up to him and admired him, that was one of the reasons I wanted to come as well. I didn't, but he was in London. So he picked me up from the airport. But the reason I went to Glasgow was because my professor was there and he had offered me the place in the Master of Pharmaceutical Microbiology. That's why I came.
What was your very first impression of UK? Like, because you had probably had this picture in your mind from reading all those books, and then when you actually arrived, what was it like?
It was even better than I imagined because I came in April, so the weather was nice. It was a good spring. And in Glasgow, the streets were all, lined with entertainment. You have street entertainment in the summer. So this is 1978, 79. It was wonderful to see all that. But my first impression was how friendly all the local people were. In Rhodesia, the white people were not that friendly to us. They would just ignore us. We were not, I mean, not all of them were racist, but still, they lived a very privileged life. We didn't mix much. And here, oh my goodness, people were so friendly. I arrived in Glasgow with my little suitcase. I was going to find my hall of residence, came out of Queen Street station, and I thought, oh my God, where do I go? There's so many people. And I went to the kiosk where there were 2 elderly Glaswegian ladies, and I'll never forget this. And I said to them, which way do I go to? I'm trying to get to this particular hall. And the lady tried to explain it to me in her Glaswegian accent, and I didn't pick up what she was saying, not everything anyway. And the other lady said, hold on, Hen, hold on, I'll take you there. And she got out of her kiosk and walked me out of the station a little way up the street and said, now you just go down that road, Hen, and you'll find it. And I couldn't believe how lovely she was. And as I was walking along, there were a group of builders and they were white and they were catcalling and everything. And I thought, these are white people, and I'm not white. And they all being so friendly and equal. So that was my first impression of how friendly everybody was in Glasgow.
That's so positive, actually, because a lot of the
Yeah,
conversations or that we've had online and offline, often the first impressions are like, oh, the weather's so cold and all of this stuff, or like it feeling really homesick because you're so far away, you've got no family or friends around you. So that's been really refreshing, actually, to hear your perspective or your experience.
yeah.
And being from such a large family, I think it's incredible that you were one of nine. That is so, so incredible. Did you find that that changed you as you were growing up, or that impacted your journey in any way?
Not really. I mean, I feel that we were all, my parents, brought us up as being independent and full of confidence and everything. So all my siblings were like me, but they all had different interests and skills. My brother, who is the solicitor, and I were the only sort of academics. One of my younger sisters is as well. We wanted to make our mark in God, and I wanted to leave Rhodesia. At the time that I left, there was a war going on there. There was you call it the Bush War, where the Black African freedom fighters were trying to overthrow the white minority government. So the government at the time were trying to recruit even non-white people, like our Indian young men were being recruited into the army to fight with the white soldiers against the blacks. So if Indian people were leaving anyway, because we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to fight for a racist government. And I didn't like staying there. I felt that at that time, when I was 18, 19, no, by that time I was about 20, 21, I wanted to, spread my wings. I just wanted to get out of the country and see. And so it didn't bother me, that my family were there. I thought that there was constant contact. And yeah, I was ready to venture out in the world, full confidence, full, expectation that I was going to make my mark in the world.
That's so lovely and refreshing to hear. That's fantastic. And if we look at your interest in reading and writing novels, you mentioned you always had a passion for English. It was something that you spoke very well at home, and you were clearly very, very talented in that subject. How did you nurture that passion for English while studying pharmacy and then pharmaceutical biology?
Yes, now I loved English and I wanted to do that. I did want to take it up further after my A levels, but I was advised that subjects like that, it's very difficult to get a career. And I grew up the generation that you go into do something where you can earn money. And so pharmacy was something that I was recommended to do. But I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But all the time I was reading, reading, reading. I mean, I would never go to sleep without a book by my side, and I would always read a couple of chapters. And sometimes, you're both readers, so you get so engrossed. But I never dreamt that I would ever be a writer. I didn't think it was possible for someone like me. And so I didn't have this big dream that one day I'd be a writer. I just thought it would be nice, And some of the books I read, I thought, I can do this. But of course, I wasn't big-headed enough to think that I could just go into it. So when I semi-retired, when was it, 2015, I thought, what? Something I've always wanted to do. Let me go on a course and train myself to be a writer. I don't want to just jump into being a writer. So I went on an online course, and it was a 2-year comprehensive creative writing course where I had a mentor, but I had lots of exercises to do. So that's what I was doing, homework, on my laptop and all this. And then came COVID. And when the pandemic hit, I started writing. This idea of the story of my first novel was in my head all along. So I started writing a few chapters, and I saw this competition. By the way, I also subscribed to writing magazines. I joined a local writing group where we met every month and discussed each other's amateur writing. Obviously, I was already part of a book club, so I did all the right things to nurture my writing ambition. And then I applied for several actually competitions. I submitted a couple of chapters to several competitions, just got knocked back, knocked back, knocked back. Finally, one of them said, "We like your first 3 chapters. Send us a few more." So I did. And I got longlisted for that competition. I got shortlisted for that competition. They invited me for the presentation for the Mo Susharan writing competition. And lo and behold, I got the runner-up prize. And nobody could have been more shocked than me. And I realized at that point that I had something that people might want to read. So when pandemic struck, I sat down, head down, and I wrote solidly, and I finished the novel it did take me about 2 years, I must admit. I had already spent several months doing that before I sent it out to agents. So that's my writing ambition and story.
I love that. I think it seems like you just had a curiosity that you kept alive in doing the different things, but with no sort of agenda at play, but sort of one thing led to the other, and you sort of, slowly but surely followed that. And what message would you like to give to people who have a passion or a hobby in something, and that they absolutely love, but they cannot realistically pursue it as a career? Which I think there's quite a lot of us probably who have interests in various different domains, different to our profession, but your energies are kind of split. Also with your other personal responsibilities as well. What could you say to them?
Yeah, my advice is always if you really have a passion for something, just keep nurturing it. It's very difficult. Life gets in the way. You may not be able to do it then, but there will come a time when you can. So do not give up. But more than that, believe in yourself. Have the confidence. Don't feel I'll never be able to do it. I'll never be able to do it. Even if you think you're never going to be able to get anywhere with it, have a go at it and then keep trying. And I always believe that hard work will pay off. You do have to work hard. You can't just think, oh, in my case, I could have said, it would be nice to write, and then not do the work for it. I feel that when I once said it to a group of people who'd come for dinner, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be a writer. And they all looked at me as if to say, gosh, what a silly thing to say. You're never going to be able to do. In other words, they thought I was big-headed. But I wasn't saying it being big-headed. I was saying it thinking, I'll put the work into it before I do it, but I am going to do it. So have the confidence, don't give up, nurture it. There will come a time when you'll be able to do it. You'll have the time. Even if it's retirement time, like me, you can still do it.
Wow.
Whatever
You
you're doing,
mentioned,
not just writing, anything really. Yeah.
It's really
wow.
inspiring. And I've read your first novel, The Secret of Relevance. Loved it. Your second one is on my ever-growing reading list. And so I will be getting there eventually. I wanted to ask you also about reading and books in a society where children are exposed to screens of many kinds very early on for various reasons. And I'm not saying this judgmentally, it's just the society we're in. Technology's moved on. Like we grew up, for example, like using the library as probably as childcare. Like and in the holidays, our parents would be like taking us there, and we'd, spending hours there and taking part in all these sort of initiatives they had to get people to read more and collect these tokens as you go along. And we were really encouraged to read a lot and read widely when we were at school. But I remember getting to a point and when I was in A levels, where my tutor was like, make sure you read widely, but I was really struggling to keep up with my academic work, and reading just took a back seat. But I think because I always had that within me, there was a phase where maybe I didn't read so much and then took it back up again when the time allowed. And I have a Kindle and I travel with it everywhere I go. If I have any opportunity, I whip it out. And I love the actual physical books that you can touch as well. But yeah, going back to my question, what can you say to you're a grandmother with two young granddaughters? How do you keep the excitement around books alive?
That's such a good question because it does worry me that people don't read. Because if you go to a wedding, an Indian wedding, and there are 500 people there, I'm sure there's only about 20, 30, or maybe 50 people who read fiction like us. Then I think, okay, there's nonfiction as well. So many of them may be reading nonfiction or graphic novels as long as they're reading. So that is a good question. How do you make sure that people get interested and stay interested in reading? So with my two little grandchildren who are 18 months and 20 months, I have a little bookshelf. I bought it for them and I put various colored large books, age appropriate books there for them. And every time they come, I invite them to pick one out and I read it to them. And I keep changing those books, because it's a small bookshelf. So they get new books because I realize that after I've read one book to them several times, they start getting bored with it and then they want to go to their toys. So I keep changing the books and I notice that when I get a new book, they're more interested. So that's what I'm trying to instill in them and keep on reading. But in amongst other things as well, they love their little toys as well. Going on to older children, I am really heartened to see that there are more and more books for children with people of color. So I am so pleased that, it was so different in my time, must be different in your time as well, where there was nobody there that looked like us in the books. Now there are. So I'm hoping that'll interest the children and keep their interest. But I think as parents and aunts and uncles, we have to keep reading to them, keep getting new books for them. They'll get bored with the same books. Excuse me. They will. So you need to just keep on at it and don't give up. And then if you see that there's one book that they really like, keep bringing that one back. And then a new one, keep bringing that back. And then when they get older, keep changing the age appropriate ones. Then you get the adventure books that boys will love. And of course, girls as well, because it's all sort of got to be the same. And bring that in. And yes, why not romance? I remember reading loads of Mills and Boon's book when I was a teenager. Why not bring those in as well? It doesn't matter. Just whatever the book is, read. Don't feel that you have to choose the book for them. So I really feel so strongly about insisting that children read. Sometimes it may not work, and maybe the child will read later. They'll stop but keep that interest going. I have two daughters, and I brought them up exactly the same way, and they're both in their 30s now. And one of them is a bookworm like me. The other one, she only reads if she really has to. She will not read any novels. I mean, she's read my two novels and enjoyed them, but I know that she doesn't read as much as I would like her to read. But, hopefully when maybe she's got a bit more time, she'll read more. But reading is so important. I'm so passionate about that.
Do you know, it's so funny you say that because your two daughters, it's kind of similar to Tejal and I. Tejal is an absolute bookworm, whereas for me, I have these wonderful ideals where I want to read so many books. I even got a fitted unit done, and it's got wonderful books, and it just looks so beautiful. It makes me look so intelligent, and I just tell myself, I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this at some point. But you've really inspired me that even if it's 30 minutes every day to start reading, because I think you are totally right. There is immense value in reading, and just exercising that part of your brain and just being creative and thinking about things. So I think the other thing you mentioned was you actually need to really nurture that love for reading. So what you're doing with your grandchildren, it does take effort, it does take energy. It's not something that, they'll suddenly be interested in books. And I suppose my other question that comes from an author, because I not usually get to speak to a published author, is where do you get your ideas from? How do you keep how do you exercise your imagination? How does that, do you do any specific things to make it grow or nourish it? I'd be really interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, that's true. You do need ideas and you do need imagination. For my first book, I always wanted that story told. I always wanted the story. And because I grew up in Zimbabwe, and there's not many books about Zimbabwe. Rhodesia, I grew up in Rhodesia before it became Zimbabwe. Not many books about that and about the small Indian population. So I knew that was a unique thing. I've spent so many years, almost, 3 decades in this country, so I feel very British. So I've got that I can write about. But I was born in India and I was a very small baby when I left India. My parents took me back to their home in Rhodesia. But I have this love for India. I grew up in Rhodesia, but my culture is Indian. I went to Gujarati school. My parents, instilled the Hindu religion in me and the Indian culture in me. And I have this strong um, you know, feeling for India. And I went back to India many times because my father had this house built in India, which I wrote about in my first book. I just took the idea and I fictionalized it. So that's where the idea came from. My father had this house built, it was a mansion in India. My story is about this mansion in India, but it's fictionalized. And then there's a connection with that family in India with the family in Rhodesia. So I brought that connection in and I made a mystery out of it using my imagination. So that's where I got that idea from. And in the second one, I thought, well, I've spent so many years in the UK. I'm going to start with the UK. And I thought about a mixed race person in this country with links to India and with Zimbabwe. So one of the things that on my creative writing course I was taught is write about what you know, because you'll be passionate about the things that you know. If I start writing about America, it may come out as, not authentic. So I stick to what I know, but I fictionalize everything and I throw ideas about. And I think about something that may have happened to me in my third book, which I'm now beginning to think about and, jot down things about. I'm going to bring in the element of segregation in Rhodesia because I don't think many people know about it. I always think I want to write about, yeah, there you go. You've not heard about the segregation laws in Rhodesia. You've heard about apartheid in South Africa, but there was segregation and apartheid and racism in Rhodesia. So I'm going to bring that in, but I don't want to write a political novel. That's not me. It's just going to be that idea. So that idea has come from my experience of being turned away at a cafe. I went to get a bottle of Coke, a can of Coke. No, there were bottles at that time. And all I wanted was the bottle of Coke. And I wanted to go away. I wasn't going to drink it in that all white cafe. And the African waiter came up to me. He was told by his white owner, tell her this. So he came over to me and said, I'm sorry, we don't serve non-whites. And I was so hot and thirsty and I couldn't buy this Coke. And I walked away. So that has stayed with me. So that idea is what I'm going to put into this book, but I'm going to fabricate all sorts of things about people around that using any experience I have. And of course, I travel a lot. I've just come back from China. So I've learned a few things in China, the similarity of their culture and our Indian culture. I'm going to bring a little bit of that in as well. So that's where I get my ideas from, traveling, talking to people. As I said, I love chatting to people. Everybody's life is interesting. Every single person's life is interesting. And if I get lucky enough to chat to them and find out a little about their life, then I'll maybe fit it in somewhere in my stories. That's where I get my ideas from.
That's so exciting that you're working on a third novel,
Yeah,
and I love the fact, I think just that story you shared just reminds me of a quote about from Maya Angelou about you forget what people said or what they
yes,
did, but you don't forget how they made you feel. And that
feel.
feeling of being turned away from a cafe has stayed with you all these
Yes,
years. And it's so strong that you're actually going to include that
yeah,
in one of your projects. I completely agree. I think everybody's got a story, and I think this is one of the reasons that inspired us to create this platform to share these stories, the stories that everyone's carrying with them, but we don't really appreciate them, or we don't have the opportunity to really kind of explore them. And for people like my sister and I who've been born here, also have this amazing heritage that involves
yeah.
India and Africa, we could just sit here for hours and listen to story upon story to try and really understand what it must have been like. And it makes us really grateful for all the opportunities we've had. But equally, I just feel like there's so many voices that haven't had the chance to be heard. And often they are of women as well, who've sort of been in the background and toiling away, keeping their family together very silently, and sacrificing and all the rest of it. And I just really feel very strongly about trying to capture it. And doing this experience, having this experience, we've learnt, people have told us, we've like, no one's ever asked us these questions. And can you imagine how much people have within them, but
Yeah.
just never have had the conversation, to be able to share these things. And I think it's really, really important that we do much more of
I
that.
do as well. I am so proud of both you girls for doing this because it is to be applauded. There are so many women that I have spoken to who've not had the positive experiences that I've had coming to this country. Like you say, many of them came and they found the country very cold and gloomy, and they struggled when they came here. I was fortunate that I've already had one degree, and I came from quite a well-to-do family already. So I didn't struggle. But my parents did struggle. They struggled when they grew up and went from India. Well, my grandparents, put it that way. It was my grandparents who went at the turn of the 20th century from India to Rhodesia. And things were very stark there, and they really had a hard time. And when they went, there wasn't any apartheid at that time. But then when my parents were born, they went through apartheid. It was tough for them. And they worked hard. I know my father worked really hard to get where he got to, and he's my role model. He worked so hard. He became the president of the Hindu Society there, and he did a lot of very good charitable work. So looking up to him. But his children, like me, we I think we benefited from all the hard work that they did. And I want to prove that that was my biggest regret, that my book was published after my father died, because he would have been so proud of me, because I actually wrote about his mansion in India, which he had such a lot of, well, as part of his life, because he worked hard, saved the money, and went and built that. And we spent a lot of happy holidays there. So yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate, even though I'm, a generation, ahead of you, but I know my parents struggled, and I know a lot of women that you have interviewed, that you will still interview, who came to this country and did struggle. So I do feel fortunate, like you.
I'm sure your father would be incredibly proud of you, and the
Yeah,
legacy that you've captured in the form of a novel will be
yeah,
around forever, which is amazing. Actually, I wanted to ask you a question about your career in pharmacy, which you
yeah.
mentioned that you enjoyed and you had a really long, flourishing career in that sector. How did you stay engaged over the years in your profession?
Well, it's a very hard profession in that you've got to give total, your 5 days a week responsibility there with pharmacy. It's a science degree. So I had to work really hard there. And I was lucky I enjoyed it as well. As soon as I came to this country, I did my master's. I was very lucky in that I got a job as a basic grade pharmacist at a hospital in West London. It was Hillingdon Hospital, actually.
So
And
we were
I
born.
worked where you were born.
We were both
Yep,
born in
both of
Hillingdon.
us. Yep.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I was there quite a few years at the hospital pharmacy. So I learned hospital pharmacy and I worked my way up to a certain level in hospital pharmacy. And then I saw this job advert for working as a pharmacist in a pharmaceutical company, Glaxo Pharmaceutical. They were in Greenford and I lived in Greenford at the time. So I applied for that job and I worked there and worked my way up in the research area there. Then I got married, had a baby. All the time I was working, all the time in pharmacy. And pharmacy, with any science profession, like your dentistry profession, moves on. You've got to keep up with it. You've got to keep up with it. Lots of colleagues, lots of friends, lots of, communication about pharmacy. I took up a little bit of maternity leave, went back and worked part time. This time, a new job in pharmacy had come up called prescribing advisors for a health authority. So I worked as a prescribing advisor, working with GPs, looking and analyzing their prescribing habits. Then I was smitten. That's what I loved doing. So most of my career was doing that, prescribing advice to GPs. And I moved to different areas, worked my way all the way up to the top. I became head of what's called medicines management in Hillingdon CCG, the Clinical Commissioning Group, which is part of the NHS. So I was responsible for a huge budget that we used to allocate, me and my team used to allocate to the GP practices. Again, you'll have to keep your CPD, continuous pharmacy, continuous postgraduate education. You just have to keep up with the medicine knowledge that's going up. Luckily for me, I loved every minute of it, so I kept that going. There wasn't really any time for any writing there. There was just reading and bringing up my children. But my interest outside work was dancing. I loved classical Indian dance.
How did you
Um,
how did you get exposed to that?
right. Well, when I was in Rhodesia, we had this Indian community, Indian school, Indian performances, and we used to do Garba, Ras, and things like that. But I always loved classical dance. We didn't have a classical dance teacher. So when I came to this country, I searched for one and I found one in Sunita Golwala. She was one of the first Indian classical dance teachers in this country. And she had a group called the Navkala Dance Academy. I joined, and twice a week after work, I would go and dance, learn dancing, Bharatanatyam and Kathak. And I worked my way up there as well, alongside my pharmacy and my children. So I did a lot of stuff. But when you're young, you have all that energy. Yeah, and then I think we did a lot of performances. I even taught children classical Indian dance at the Sangam Center for 10 years. Um, and then I joined the Sujata company when my dance teacher retired. And that's where I met you, Tejo.
Yeah.
And I loved that. But by this time, I realized, oh my God, I cannot do these circles as fast as these young people. And I
I feel the
realized,
same way. Don't worry.
When I go to the dance shows and I watch Tejal and the other students spinning, I'm just in awe, and they're so
I
elegant and
know.
Well, they're like
No,
swans. It's just
Swans.
beautiful.
do you know what though? I'm often in classes where there's girls half my age and they are just so
Oh, so
fun,
good.
but it forces me to really up my
Mhm.
game and
Yeah,
and then you can see actually what's really nice having done it for a few years now. You can
yes.
reflect and see,
Oh,
okay,
you've
I can,
progressed.
yeah,
I've
there
seen
has
you
been.
dance. You're a very good dancer. I really hope you continue.
No, I do. It's something I do just for me. It's the thing that I
Yes,
do for me, gives me
that's
joy,
what I did.
and that's it really. And
Yeah,
that you want to get better at it as well. And I
of
think the
course.
it is one of my creative outlets. It really is.
Yes,
You're using a
exactly.
different part of your brain from your
Yes,
day to day, and I think that's so important. That
absolutely.
everybody has an opportunity to do something different from
Oh,
their
yes.
daily routine. Um,
Yeah. And that sustained me all my, because I mean, my life hasn't been a breeze all this, all these years. I'm sort of a cup half full person, but there have been moments in my life where I've been in despair and upset and all this. What kept me going was my dancing because it's therapy, it's mathematics, it's creative, it's just a joy. I used to go away from home feeling really depressed, go to my class, and I used to come back full of joy. And then my problems were over for that day.
Yeah,
Isn't
I
that
cannot say. I think
incredible?
during the pandemic there was so much going on.
Yeah,
Even like everyone has had a lot going on, and I think the one constant when you were going through a difficult time or you're on a bit of a roller coaster ride, the one constant I've noticed for me has also been dance, and I think that just has helped me
ditto,
keep me
ditto.
grounded,
Keep it going,
keep you
Tejo.
connected to yourself
Yeah,
as well.
But
So
yeah,
do you know, you both are so fortunate that you found something, you found a constant that you
yes,
connected to and that really brought out a different side to you and you could use it as a release. And I think that's probably something for everyone to think about, to find a hobby, to
yes,
cultivate that and also commit to it. So I
yeah,
see Jill really committing to her dancing, going every week. And I think when you commit to something that you like in an activity, you really can reap all the benefits from it, just like you did to your writing and your
yeah.
pharmacy. Which is
Yes, I
which
think my writing has kind of replaced that creative
mm,
urge in me, replaced the dancing because I can't dance anymore. I'm of an age where I can't keep up with everyone, but I do love watching it. But my creative juices are now gone into my right. But you know what you said about everybody should have something like that is very true. And when I married my husband, he was a really keen cricketer, and there were a lot of women who didn't let their husbands continue playing cricket over the weekend and one day in the week and all the rest of it because of all the things that happen. You get married, there's so many things that you have to keep up with, and I never stopped him from doing that. And then he moved on to golf, and now he is retired, semi-retired. He has that friendship and that kinship with his friends as well, so he's got that which he can, because when you're married you can't just be joined at the hip all the time. You have to have other things that you can do away from work, away from home, away from work, away from the children. And he's got that, and I nurtured that for him because he would have given it up if I'd said, no, come on, there's too much to do at home. So I agree with you. I think everyone should have something
no,
like
I
that.
think that's also very healthy how you talk about even when you're in a relationship like marriage, giving
Yeah,
each other space so you can nurture your own
yeah,
skills and interests because it's similar. Like my husband and my interests. My husband's a massive cricket fan. For
yeah,
me, it's noise, you know, but
yeah.
it's okay to have different interests and actually that's healthy, like you
And
say.
let him do it because when you're older and when you're retired, you still need to have your own interests because life can
Absolutely.
be very boring if you're retired and you don't have something like that.
Absolutely,
it's been
absolutely.
such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And I'm sure our listeners would have so much, will derive a lot of inspiration, as well as a few important things to hopefully think about and ponder on. As we close, is there one lesson or piece of advice that you would like to share to future generations, your grandchildren, for example, based on your journey so far?
I think the main message is try and be positive. Because if you always, are a victim and you keep saying it's, oh, woe is me, my life is so hard, you don't understand, there's no time, I'm tired all the time. I hear this a lot, even with young people, and it's always negative. I think that even from a negative, you can say, okay, that's not good, but let's look forward. Try and be positive. Be somebody who is a glass half full rather than a glass half empty. If you have a positive mindset, everything will work out. Honestly, it will. Just keep positive about everything and keep trying and work hard. Don't give up. Those are my messages.
That's a
Oh,
brilliant
thank you
message
so
to
much for sharing that. And I can't wait to read The Secret of Elephants.
You
What's your
must. And then
second
move
novel
on to
called?
The Promise of Rain. Listen, girls,
Yes.
thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed chatting to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.